Hello, 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 hello. Welcome to the 10 Things channel. For this place, whatever is bothering your mind that you cannot answer, so long as about Christianity, it will be answered here, actually. Today, we are tackling another important topic. I'm sure you might have heard it of late. It's an issue that has been coming up. Um, an issue that I'm sure you've heard about severally. It, is going to church or is deciding not to go to church a sin? Or is it a sin to not go to church as a Christian? Actually, that's what we are talking about today. And it has become important because of certain new notions that have come up. And by the way, excuse me if you hear any noise um, at the background, it's a noise of a church nearby. And they are very busy at work around 10 p.m. In the night, with their speakers pointing right to my house. So excuse me for that. Um, it's good we are talking about church today, so we understand some of these things. Is it a shame to not attend a church as a born again Christian? That is what we are talking about today. And I believe it's going to be a blessing to you in every way, shape, or form. Let's pray. Precious Lord, thank you for this word. Come and teach us, Lord. Come and illuminate us. Come and bless us, even as your word comes. In Jesus' name, have we prayed. Amen. You're all welcome, my viewers. Welcome to this community where we talk about the difficult things in Christianity that people don't normally want to talk about. And today, our topic is very simple but extremely important. It's not going to church a sin. I'm just thinking about once I was watching a video of a pastor in Ukraine who was criticizing another pastor in Nigeria because the pastor was preaching, and as part of the sins he was mentioning, and as part of the the wrongs he was mentioning that Christians indulge in, he happened to have mentioned not going to church um, as one of them. Also, he understood him to be saying. So we want to discuss whether that is the case. I want to do it in the shortest possible time. Please, if you don't understand anything, just write your comments down, ask your questions, and in my follow-up videos, I will address them. Okay, God bless you. So let's go to the scriptures. No, yeah, we don't do anything without referring to the scriptures. So let's go to the scriptures and search and see whether we can find that going on. There have been many times in Christian history where uh, there was no church, actually. In other words, there was no denomination. Okay, so in the first place, we need to explain what a church is, and then from there, maybe we can then tackle other things. Okay, I think we are now at where I wanted it to be. So, a church is ecclesia, meaning the called out ones. Initially, it referred to the people that have been called out of idol worship, of unbelief, to believe in Christ Jesus, the Messiah. So these are called out people. So it actually referred to a group of people who believed and who believed in Christ and were living for him, actually. But when as Paul was writing his letters to distinguish between the churches, he started referring to the church in Laodicea, the church in Thessalonica, the church in Chanchiria, the church in Babylon, the church in Ephesus, the church in Gaius' house, the church in so and so's house. And all of these things he was saying, he was not referring to a particular denomination. No, he was talking about the group of believers in a particular location. He was not referring to a church in Laodicea did not mean that was the denomination. No, it only meant that the people called out, the group born again, where they were located in Laodicea, or the church in so and so Alexander's house. It just meant the group based in Alexander's house. So they were not talking about denominations at the time. He was not talking about denominations at the time. It was just to distinguish one church from the other. Sometimes you say that the church in Rome, give your episode to the church over there to read, and then collect the one in Philippi and also read. And all of those distinctions came in. And sometimes you say things like, when the whole church gathers. So clearly, when you use the term like the whole church, it means people, because you can't have the whole church being a building or a denomination. It means the whole group. So he said, when the whole church gathers and then you are praying, when the whole church gathers and you are doing so and so, then do it this and that way. Now, there are many myths about churches, especially for unbelievers. There are many myths about churches for unbelievers. First and foremost, there's the myth that starting a church is very easy. It's one of the greatest myths in the world. People claim that some of the easiest businesses to run are churches and schools. Please try them and see. In fact, there's nothing more difficult than running a church, because nobody is there under compulsion. Unlike other things, other places where, or other religions where, if you break out of the fellowship, the people are bound to not to communicate with you, not to associate with you. Church is not like that. Church, you have to be there by your own free will, and you have to be there because you see it benefiting you. Once it sees it to be beneficial, many people stop going to church. So it's difficult to keep a group, to grow them, and then to depend on their voluntary contributions to actually build structures that will house them and that will make their worship comfortable. So anybody who believes church is easy to do, that person should actually try it and see. Then somebody would say, wow, there's churches everywhere. Actually, I had a similar impression when I was in the UK years ago, and I realized that in every neighborhood there was a church building. But you see, that is because a church is a unique structure. There was no way the churches were even close to the number of buildings. But you don't see the how numerous the buildings are, because the buildings are serving a different purpose. But once a church, its uniqueness makes it look like it appears everywhere. If you want to confirm this thing I'm saying, on Sunday, instead of going to church, go around and you see that there are much, much more people in the house than those who are in church. Indeed, there are people who have so specialized to only preach to people in the house when others have gone to church. And their ministries are doing well because there are so many people in the house when others are going to church. But the noise that people hear from the church bells, and the uniqueness of churches, and the fact that churches stand out, always give the impression to the unbelievers and to those who are in the church, who are not in churches, that there are too many churches. No, definitely not. Ask those people who are in church, how many of their brothers are there, how many of their sons are there, husbands are there, and the rest. You realize that mostly the majority of the people are still not in church. So that's the first myth that we want to debunk about churches being too many. In fact, to actually go further, let's quote let's go to some quotations so you see what I'm talking about when it comes to churches. Now, how many churches are there? In other words, as churches evolve to be seen as an assembly, in other words, the assembly also still connotes the fact that it's a group of people. So churches, as the several churches were formed in the same city, it could not be the church in Laodicea any longer, or the church in Caesarea any longer. They had to have a name to identify them. And it is those names which identify those churches that actually grew to become what we usually call now as denominations and the rest. Okay, so let's go into them actually. Let's go into them and know how many churches indeed there are, and then how many denominations there are. You know, churches are groupings of Christians. That's what we call churches, ecclesia, groupings of Christians. And if you look at the article, I'm sure you've seen it. The article I'm reading here, it gives us a number. This is from the 10th of June. It gives us a number. How many churches are there in the world? And there are 37 million churches in the world. And we are talking about a world of more than, 7 billion people. And yet there are 37 million churches in the world. 37 million churches in the world. You compare it even to Ghana. And I think in our recent census, we have more than 20 million building structures, as buildings. If you go to a developed country like the UK, you may have more than, 30 million, 40 million structures, So the 30 million here, it may appear big to you, but it's not so big. It's not so big at all. We're talking about 30 million assemblies of believers. We are talking about Christians whose number is reputed to be above 1 billion. And we have only 37 million churches. I know some of the churches can be as big as the what do you call it? Is it Dynamis? The Dynamis Church in Nigeria, which is over 100,000, or the Living Faith Church in Lagos, which is 75,000, and the rest, and Salvation Ministry Church. But then most of these churches are fewer people altogether. So, okay, so let's move on. So from the church, we then have what we call the denominations. But usually when people talk about churches, they're rather referring to the denominations and not the assemblies within the denomination. And the denominations are only 34,000. Can you imagine? The whole world, denominations are only 34,000. Somebody will say, but what is denomination? Okay, let's get it from the Oxford Languages Dictionary. And I'm sure you can read it with me. A denomination is a recognized autonomous branch of the Christian church. In other words, any autonomous branch of the Christian church can be called as a denomination. And there are only 34,000 of them, according to the article above. Only 34,000. This is 2020 data, 34,000, which means that truly when you are talking about churches, we are not talking about the assemblies. Even though people keep saying churches are many, truly in the whole world, churches are just 34,000, the whole world. So churches are not as many as we want to claim they are actually. They are not many at all. So, and typical examples, we have Presbyterian, the Methodist, Assemblies of God, Church of Pentecost. These are all autonomous, independent churches, actually. We have the Catholic Church, we have, these are all independent churches, Seventh-day Adventists, these are all independent churches, and there are only 34,000 of them, actually. So that is that. Now, so we've talked about churches, its evolution. We've also talked about what is a denomination, what's an assembly, and the rest. And we are going through all of these things because we want you to have a certain understanding of church. So that when somebody talks about church, you will see that it goes far beyond what most people believe they know about church. So not attending a church means that you are not part of any denomination. It means you are not part of any assembly. That's what it means. And we are asking, if you're a person like that, does it mean you are sinning? Does that make you a sinner? That is what we are actually discussing today. Okay, so that's what we are discussing today. Does not going to church or being part of any assembly make you a sinner? Most of us grew up attending church with, if not our father, with our mothers. And basically say you are born into an assembly. You are born into Catholicism, or you are born into the SDA, Seventh-day Adventists. You're born into Jehovah's Witness, you are born to Latter-day Saints and things like that. So you are born into an assembly, you are born to a denomination. But sometimes along the way, you have an encounter with God yourself. And then by reason of his leading, you then choose where you want to fellowship. So you change denomination, you may change assembly, or you may even decide to change a tradition altogether. Yes. So you may change the denomination altogether, actually. And it's all because of the distinctions of their faith, actually. There are two main categories, or let's say three main categories of churches. We have what came to be the Catholic Church, or what they used to call the Universal Church. And their practices are called Catholicism. And it's a church where people are born into, baptized young, and they grow with that tradition of Catholicism, actually. And then there are also other that we call the Orthodox, the other Greek Orthodox, Armenian Orthodox churches, Ethiopian also Orthodox churches. They are also different, very different churches, very different cultures. Churches that might have come out of the Byzantine Empire and the rest. And then the Catholicism mainly is a church that evolved from the Holy Roman Empire, actually. Then there were those who came out of the Catholic Church, which we normally call the Protestants, because the 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 evolution of the church came out of protest of certain things that were seen as wrong. So Martin Luther just complained about some things that he thought were wrong as far as the Bible was concerned with the Catholic practices. So they were called Protestant church. And when they also evolved over certain years, they came to be known as Orthodox churches. In other, we have the Lutheran church, we have the Methodist church, we have the Presbyterian church, and so many others that I might not be able to remember here and now. So those also came as new independent denominations, actually independent denominations. And then after them, we had the Pentecostal churches, and typically we are talking about the Assemblies of God, the Latter Rain, the Four Square Gospel Church, the Full Gospel churches, and then when it comes typically to Ghana, we have the Church of Pentecost, the Living Faith Church, the Christ Apostolic Church, Pentecostal churches. Then from these Pentecostal churches, as the Spirit of God moved, there were other people that also came out to form their own independent churches. And they came to be known typically as the charismatic churches. What is the nature of the charismatic church? What is the distinguishing feature of the charismatic churches? The charismatic churches is based on a founder whose giftings and callings actually define the church. So it's a founder whose giftings and callings define the church. So if it's a founder who was based on so much on the word, we call it the word miracle church. If the founder believes that he has not broken forth, we call it a Perez church. If it was somebody who was working miracle signs, we call the word miracle church. It was somebody who was teaching the word, call it International Central Gospel Church. Actually, somebody preaching salvation ministry, somebody preaching faith church or faith tabernacle, and somebody who's emphasizing love tabernacle. So, depending on the vision, the calling of the founder, then the name was given. All of these things, they are denomination, they are independent churches, and yet they have the tradition of charismatism, or that they have the church tradition of Pentecostalism. If you had to go into the traditions of Pentecostalism, it will be a long thing to talk about. And now, obviously, we are having, usually, even though they're still under charismatic churches, We're having what we usually now call the prophetic churches. In other words, churches led by prophets who prophesy on a daily basis. Churches that people attend because they want to hear prophecies. They want to hear prophecies about their life, actually. And as churches evolve, they become bigger and bigger than the founder, and institutions become more established, and decisions become more collective than a decision by the founder, a decision by the leader, a decision because the founder heard from God or something of the sort. So we have gone through this evolution of churches, all so that you understand what a church is. What you understand what a church is. So any church, every church that we see, it starts as one church. That church sends people around. They form other churches, and then if they are unified and together, then those churches become assemblies of that church. So let's do a typical anatomy of a church, like a church, one of the biggest churches in Ghana now, the Church of Pentecost. A typical anatomy of a church, like the Church of Pentecost, it has its executive council members who are the highest body of the church. But then it has the what do you call it, the general assembly or the general council meeting, and those that constitute the executive members and some heads and selected members of the clergy, and then some lay members, senior lay members. So the decisions that certain decisions that executive council, which runs the church day-to-day church takes, if it has to do with choosing certain members of the executive council and there were certain key members, then it has to be ratified by voting of the general council. So we cascade that down, and then we have within those things there are leaders of ministries, there are directorates and the rest. So then you come to the main church down there, and it mimics the church up there. There's a chairman of the council, executive council, and then they have terms of office. There's a secretary, there's a television mission director, and the rest. And then we come down there, we have area levels where we also have an area apostle, a prophet, or pastor, and then we have also an area presbytery, and then we have below them we have a district headed by a pastor. So we have this presbytery system. Okay, it's a presbytery system. And every stage we have the lay and then the clergy coming together to take decisions. Now we have senior ones too in the Catholic churches and the Methodist churches. Some of them use different nomenclature. Some of them they are diocese, some of them they are diocese. Instead of districts, they are diocese. And then there maybe areas are diocese. Others to the names they give to your pastors, they don't use the apostle or prophet or teacher or pastor, but then they use, bishop, father, archbishop, cardinal, and the rest. They are all just nomenclature, but purposefully they're doing the same thing. Actually, they're doing the same thing. The essential thing about normally the Pentecostals and then the Orthodox is that the Pentecostals emphasize being born again, and then also emphasize the manifestation of the baptism of the Holy Spirit to the speaking in tongues. So that's where the Pentecostals differ, actually. Fortunately, in Ghana now, many Orthodox churches, including the Catholic Church, also now have come around to believe in the speaking in tongues. So there's not that much of a problem. But the structure, as I'm talking about, is the nomenclature is different, but they serve similar purposes, actually. So that is a typical church. And then we have down to the assembly, where we also have a local assembly, a local presbytery, a presiding elder, or some places they call them or have for what do you call it? Somebody who is in charge of church in Orthodox churches, so that at every stage in time, leadership is there. So the leadership is continuous from the very top to the very bottom. You may ask me, why are you talking about all of these things? People know these things. You'll be surprised. There are whole doctrines against this structure. When the Bible is clear that God wants order, the others who do not believe that, therefore, they have a problem of there being a structure even in the first place, actually. But it is this which ensures uniformity, ensures the information are passed down from the top to bottom and from bottom to top. And it's a very efficient system. In fact, most of the time I say in many places in Africa, the only leadership that is really working is mostly the church leadership. That is why the church leadership is doing mighty things that even governments are finding difficult to do. There are churches that have built, churches that have been existent for less than 50 years, that have built 3 universities from scratch. I mean, from scratch. I mean, unheard of even for some government to do in that length of time. You know, there are churches running airlines, churches running several numerous schools, churches running schools from all the way from nurseries to universities and the rest. And it's all because there's this very well defined, chain of command. Yes, well defined chain of command. Somebody say, but in the charismatic circles, those that have grown, they have also mimicked these very structures I'm talking about. But there are some that have one big church. So in the one big church, there's a founder, the general overseer, the associate pastors who take care of various things from worship to women's ministry. And then they attend to the needs of the church members. So that is typical church for you. This will be the first part of the message. Is it a sin not to go to church? God bless you. I pray that the Lord will open your eyes of your understanding. May the illumination that only comes from the Holy Ghost overshadow you, even as you listen to this message. Is not going to church a sin. God bless you so much.